Just wanted to do a brief introduction. My name is John Gresser. I'm the campus manager for Campion College. I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. Today is a very special day in the tradition, the spiritual tradition of this land on which we are on. I'd like to acknowledge the Marist fathers. Today is the feast of the Holy Name of Mary. It's their patronal feast day. The Marist fathers opened their seminary here in 1938 and operated for nearly 60 years. And this is where the very great Dr. Father Austin Woodbury taught. He was one of the founders, the founder of the Aquinas Academy. And you all drove in on Austin Woodbury Drive at the front this morning, named in his honour. So just briefly, Campion College is Australia's first and only liberal arts college, Catholic liberal arts college, offering a bachelor degree in the liberal arts, and the course has now been running here for nearly 20 years. I'm pleased to see a number of current students, as well as alumni from the college. Thank you for returning. And I'd also like to acknowledge Father Gregor. Thank you for coming this evening. I'm going to hand over to Joseph, who will introduce people. Practically speaking, if there is an alarm tonight, don't be alarmed. The emergency evacuation point is at the very front of the college, near that green circle. The grass circle at the front, just go to the right-hand side. The toilets are down and to the left, at the front of the college, at the front of the walkway here. While you're here, you're most welcome to mingle and to be at the front here. Please, there are residential students who live on site. We can just stay well clear of those residential areas. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. So we're here tonight to listen to a talk by Father Greg Morgan about the power of prayer and the importance of prayer in the pro-life movement. Thank you very much to Father Greg Morgan for coming out for this. So before that, we'll be addressed by Mr. Paul Hanrahan, who will introduce Father Greg Morgan. Now, Mr. Paul Hanrahan is the Executive Director of Family Life International. He's been so for 15 years, come this October, and he's been involved with Family Life International for over 30 years. He's managed 8 40 Days for Life campaigns, and he's been involved in thousands of hours of helpers vigils. So, Mr. Paul Hanrahan will introduce Father Greg Morgan, and he's also going to talk to us a little bit about what 40 Days for Life is, and why we're organising this for Sydney next year, and why it's such a great thing to be a part of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 40 Days for Life is familiar to some of you, but maybe not to others. The background for 40 Days for Life, for those who don't know, and I think that's probably most of you, is that was a group of pro-life people in Texas, in a place called Bryan and College Station. They're like twin towns. And they used to pray at the local Planned Parenthood abortion mill, and they would meet afterwards. They'd have socials together. There's a whole group of families, couples and their kids, and they would discuss other pro-life activities, how they could advance the pro-life cause. A topic many pro-lifers have engaged in, of course. How do we advance the cause? And there was a member of their group, and he was keen on he proposed the idea of 40 Days for Life. 40 days starting on Ash Wednesday and going through to Palm Sunday, 24/7. They all thought he was crazy. What? What are you? Finally, they agreed. Turns out that this guy would have been aborted if his father had his way before his parents were married, and he only found that out when his father was very sick in hospital and dying, and his father would want to pray for the unborn all the time. And he asked him why he was praying for the unborn all the time, and he told him the story, and he said, okay. So he committed the very first 40 days when they established it to do every day from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And he did. And that's basically the background of it. But in how they would run a 40 Days for Life campaign, They obviously spoke to many others and many experienced pro-lifers, and everyone had told them, you have to see two people. There was a couple who ran pregnancy support places across America, and they needed to see them because they're going to be needing to refer people to pregnancy support places. And the other one was Monsignor Philip Riley, who was the founder of the Helpers of God's Precious Infants. Monsignor Riley was much of a spiritual father to me for many years. I first met him in 1995 when he came to Australia. Monsignor Riley had spent a lot of time in the pro-life cause. He'd worked with secular organisations. They'd done sit-ins. A sit-in, if you don't know, was where you basically block the entrance of the abortion clinic and so no one can get in. And of course, what happens when you do that? You get arrested and dragged off and fined and all the rest of it. And that happened several times. And he was engaged in all those sorts of activities, secular activities. Back when the abortion legislation around the Western world especially was introduced at first, when we saw people agitating for abortion and governments consenting to abortion or courts allowing abortion under certain circumstances, as in Australia, the pro-life movement started. In Australia in the 1970s, the Right to Life organisations began. Now, despite the fact they were run by mostly Catholics and Christians, they were secular organisations. Their approach was that we can win this by natural reason. We can win the arguments by science and by reason and by logic. People will see the evil of it. Well, guess what? It failed. Family Life International exists because a group of those people involved with Right to Life New South Wales realised that if we don't attend to the issue of contraception, we'll never end abortion. It's kind of like trying to fight bushfires and ignore the people who are running around starting the bushfires. You'll never win. Contraception is the evil that leads to abortion. And it's a lot of groundwork. That talk tonight's not for that, but maybe another day. They started what was then called Australian Catholic Pro-Life Association because they wanted to take a position on contraception, and the Right to Life groups wouldn't take that because they were secular organisations. They started a overtly Catholic organisation. They engaged in events then that used prayer. They were prayerful. And basically is how they came to meet Monsignor Riley and how I came to meet him, and how we established the Helpers approach here in Sydney, basically only just after I got involved in praying outside abortion clinics. So that's a bit of background to that. Why does prayer work? 40 Days for Life has been one of the most successful apostolates in the last 20 odd years, 21 years I think they've been going. They went and saw Monsignor Riley and spent the first day with him talking to him about strategies. And when they started 40 Days for Life, the very first campaign, he came down to Tyler, Texas, and attended it with them. He showed them what to do. Often you need to be shown what to do. And that's how that started. That's 40 Days for Life. So 40 Days for Life, the approach is prayerful. It's based on prayer and evangelising those passing by or those going in. It's not about saving babies principally, it's about saving souls. If you don't convert the mother's heart, you will never save that baby. If you block the entrance, if you make it difficult in any way to get an abortion, that won't stop her getting an abortion. You only hamper the attempt. You might put it off if you're lucky. But when you come to a place with the mindset of Jesus Christ when he was on Calvary, that he prayed for his persecutors. We pray for those people. We want their conversion. They're at risk of eternity in hell. That's a scary thought. And just by way of reference to the effectiveness of it, there was a former cardinal in Chicago, Cardinal Francis George, who attended a large vigil in Chicago run by Monsignor Riley and the Helpers. And he was asked why he went to this thing. And he said this: He wrote a simple, profound answer to why he participated in the Helpers Prayer Vigil. He said it was a normal pastoral response. The church always accompanies the dying with prayer. People die in an abortion clinic, and it is good to pray for the living they leave behind. It is also good to pray when faced with tragedy, and most people, even those who regard abortion as a necessary evil, understand that abortion is a tragedy. My decision to participate was based on the track record of the group organising the event. They promised the only words would be prayers and that everything would be peaceful. I was asked many times, why are you here? I was there because it must be said again and again, our society cannot indefinitely sustain the playing off of a mother's freedom against the death of her child. The country itself will eventually come apart. And I was there because no mere argument, no matter how well crafted, will convince those who sincerely believe in a right to abort a baby. What is left, along with peaceful and respectful discussion in the public forum, is prayer in season and out of season. I was there then, along with hundreds of others to whom I am grateful, in order to pray. That's powerful, right? And the Helpers Prayer Vigils spread around the world. Every continent, Monsignor Riley took the Helpers Prayer Group Vigils too, and the 40 Days for Life apostolate has followed, and it's now run in most places 2 times a year, not just one. And I've personally seen abortion clinics close. We've been present at places that were busy while we're there, seeing 15 or so people going in for abortions. That number dwindles over several years until there's no one going in and they close the doors. Preterm Abortion Mill in Surrey Hills. Preterm was the first place I ever went to in 1994, my very first vigil, when it was in Camperdown, and it closed in 2015 in September. There was an article in the Sydney Morning Herald. They contacted me to ask me my opinion or what my response to the closure of preterm. You can imagine what I said. Prayer works. Prayer works. Conversion works. Those who know me know I've got hundreds of stories of those who changed their minds because we were present in prayer. Not judgmentally, but to help them, to offer help before or after the abortion in some cases, after. We've had a lot of women come back to us after an abortion to get help for the second or a subsequent pregnancy. If you go there with the mind of Christ, you will succeed. Now, someone who can speak far more eloquently than I can, not sure, Father Greg Morgan. I've known Father Morgan, and I was keen to get him to do this because he was a seminarian and he was doing his pastoral experience at a parish nearby to me, and we met, and he wanted to come and pray with us at the abortion clinic, and he did. And he attended several prayer vigils outside these places. He's now the parish priest at Guyamere, the closest parish to where we live. I attend there occasionally. And
not enough Latin.
and we often have a coffee and a chat. And he's an inspiring young priest. He's very good at short, pithy homilies. I'm going to be interested how the longer version will go, but I'm sure it's going to be good. He's got a master's degree from Cambridge University and a PhD from Oxford, both in philosophy. Philosophy is his field of expertise, so he's good at fielding questions and arguments. But he's certainly a very on-fire young Catholic priest. He's a great public speaker. I've heard him speak before. And he's going to address us on why prayer and our presence is so important in the battle over life. Thanks, Father.
Thank you. So I must say it's such an honour to be able to be with you tonight and to speak on such a wonderful topic. And I'd just like to begin by expressing my gratitude to Paul Hanrahan, who has been a real champion of the pro-life movement. And I have vivid memories of being a seminarian now 20-something years ago. And and meeting Paul and going off to the vigils, and that experience having a profound effect not just on my life, but also on my priesthood and on the way I think philosophically. So thank you so much, Paul, for the invitation. As I was reflecting on what to say tonight, I kept returning to an encounter I had at Heathrow Airport about 9 years ago. I've shared this encounter with some of you before, but because it gives a starting point for why I believe prayer and presence must lead the pro-life movement, I thought to share it again. So 9 years ago, about 5 a.m. in the morning, there's a delay getting into the terminal at Heathrow. Paul won't forgive me, but I wasn't dressed as a priest. And I wasn't much in the mood for conversation, vocational or otherwise. But of course, God has a sense of humor. And so the man in front of me, he starts to give off that vibe that priests know well, where we know someone wants to talk to you. And eventually he turns around and initiates conversation. Eventually there comes the dreaded question. So what do you do for a living? And at the time I could answer quite honestly, I'm a doctoral student. And he in turn told me that he was a human rights lawyer for a privately funded firm in London. His primary role, he said, is to work with legislators and politicians in different parts of the world, but especially in South America. And it involves promoting various things, but chief among them was what he described as the right to abortion. Now remember, he didn't know that I was a Catholic priest, and probably assumed wrongly that because I was at Oxford that I was a young student with woke sensitivities. Now, I can't recall exactly how this turn in the conversation came about. But he said something to me after telling me about some of his successes in South America. He asked this most curious question, maybe phrased slightly differently, but it was like this. He says, do you want to know why we've been so successful? Why we've been so successful in pushing and promoting anti-life legislation? Now, I distinctly remember thinking, what a strange thing to say. But I wasn't going to turn down the insight, right? What are the chances of a Catholic priest at 5 a.m. talking to a man who's literally celebrating the tragic success of promoting abortion throughout the world? Now, what he disclosed to me really took me by surprise. He said something like this. When we started the firm, this law firm, he said, myself and the partners sat around the table and we said to each other, let's imagine the kind of world we want to live in. And he said, together we imagined a world where every woman had the right to abortion, where every person that was dying and suffering had the right to end their life at their choosing, and where every person had the right to marry someone who they loved, irrespective of the sex. Now, to be honest, my reaction to hearing this was one of skepticism. Surely that just sounds far too simple. Surely there's something far more malicious, far more mendacious around why you've been so successful. But over time, the more I've thought about that encounter, I've realized what he was revealing to me was the power of vision. The power that comes with clear starting points. For every vision, every inspiration comes from somewhere. Every vision requires inspiration, and it doesn't come out of nowhere. It doesn't come out of a vacuum. So despite the horror of what the lawyer said to me, we cannot underestimate how powerful a vision of a future reality is. My goodness, can evil motivate people? We just think about the Charlie Kirk thing happening in the United States. How much an evil vision can motivate people. Indeed, if the saints can be inspired and motivated by a vision of God, then we should also assume that the so-called pro-choice ideology can be motivated and inspired by a vision of darkness. So dark, in fact, that the reality of the human life is not just ignored, but even completely vanquished altogether. And this brings me then to a foundational point. In life, as in philosophy, everything rests upon where we choose to begin. Beginnings shape destinies. The starting point often determines the end. If the starting point for a culture of death is a distorted vision of reality, a vision fueled by lies and darkness, how much more then must the pro-life movement return to its true starting points in prayer and in presence before the Lord of truth and light? If for that lawyer everything began around a table, imagining a kind of world that he and his colleagues wanted to will into existence, then for us everything must begin on our knees, discerning and imploring that the Lord's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so if I am to explain why the future of the pro-life movement must move beyond protest, it is only because prayer and presence can reshape us, and by reshaping us, reshape the very movement itself. And to make this concrete, what I want to offer tonight are three contrasts that perhaps point towards a different future. The first is the contrast between perception and blindness. The second is the contrast between presence and performance. And the third contrast is between living as a witness and simply grasping at power. Perception versus blindness. We must begin, before anything else, with a basic but much overlooked realization that the pro-life struggle is not at its root a political problem. It is, without question, a spiritual problem. The reality of abortion, as with euthanasia and same-sex marriage, is not primarily about policies or rights. It's about vision. It's about the way people see the world. It reflects a blindness, almost a complete inability to see what is true. You know, when you and I think about it, it's perhaps the most sobering contrast we could ever imagine. That in our society we encounter a growing number of human beings who will quite literally jump with jubilation at having the legal power to end the life of an unborn child, even up to full term. While to us the very same reality is deeply harrowing, saddening, almost unbearable to contemplate. How is it that human beings can have such different visions of reality? Such an absolute dichotomy of perspectives cannot be explained away by simply a clash of philosophies or a clash of scientific convictions or political persuasions. It is nothing less than the clash of two irreconcilable and fundamentally different views of the world, conceptions of reality. So let me reiterate again. Our struggle and our mission is not political. It is fundamentally spiritual. If we get that starting point wrong, then everything that follows will falter. One way to demonstrate this is to ask a simple question that I don't think we ask often enough. Why is it that we seem to keep losing the culture wars, especially on life issues? On the surface, at least, we think the opposite would be true. For example, as time has progressed, the science which was so readily invoked against the pro-life movement once upon a time has only become clearer and clearer. Even as far back as 2003, the revered atheist and political commentator Christopher Hitchens, he said this, and I'm quoting, he said that even the most partially formed embryo is both human and alive has now been confirmed. This is 2003, from the voice of an atheist. We are, he says, the first generation to have to confront this as certain knowledge. But the science changed nothing for him. Indeed, he then went on to say and maintain that it was absolutely essential that women have the power to abort their children for the sake of their own lives and for the sake of economic health. In fact, he said abortion was the key to an economically flourishing society. Now, I'm not saying that we should not be invested in formulating the very best of scientific arguments, that we shouldn't be invested in philosophy to support our position. But what I am saying is that even if the science is irrefutable, even if the philosophy is as compelling as possible, the facts alone won't change people's hearts and minds. The problem is so much deeper. Indeed, in today's climate, the truth doesn't really matter at all anymore. The facts don't really matter at all. Being logically inconsistent is often something to be praised. I'll give you an obvious, pertinent example of this. When a woman suffers a miscarriage, the culture instinctively speaks of the loss of a baby and rightly expresses sympathy and concern to the mother. Yet if that same child were deliberately and consciously aborted, we're told it's just a lump of cells. And we're almost expected to rejoice at that child's demise and exult that the woman has exercised free power, free will, free choice. Or consider how we are told abortion is a women's issue only, and thus men must be silent on it. But then in the next breath, we are told that men can have babies, and it's transphobic to assert the contrary. Or recall how we are told to celebrate International Women's Day and fight for women's rights. But yet the word woman is now considered impossible to define. Inconsistencies reveal incredible blindness. So return to the question, why is it that we seem to keep losing the culture wars? Well, perhaps in truth we just don't understand the culture. That's not an easy thing to admit, because understanding the culture, seeing what's really going on, is not an intellectual or academic exercise alone. That itself is profoundly spiritual. What was it about the saints that enabled them to engage the world even in the most helpless of circumstances? It was the fact that they could see beyond. They could see what only a profound interior life can enable you to see. And it was for that reason and that reason alone that they knew how to engage the culture without being captured by it. How to glimpse the future even while standing fully in the present. You see, one powerful reason why our age has lost touch with the reality of the unborn child is that it can no longer perceive the power of the real presence. It can no longer perceive real presence. Even we who are people of faith are not entirely immune to this either. When we drift away from God, as we become more and more glued to material things and lose touch with the spiritual, our conception of reality gets thinner and thinner, more virtual, more digital, less human. If people today struggle to attend to the presence of another person sitting right in front of them and prefer to stare at a screen, then what hope is there that they will tend to the silent, hidden presence of an unborn child, let alone the Eucharist? So I say again, the starting point for the future of the pro-life movement must be that this is first and foremost a spiritual battle. The battle between perception and blindness. And we will never overcome blindness through shouting, arguing, or even the most sophisticated scientific philosophical theories we can imagine or develop. To be pro-life is thus nothing less than the desire to reclaim reality and to help others to learn how to regain the capacity to see the truth. And what's the only way to make that desire a reality? It's prayer. Because prayer is the only means to learn how to see again. It must come first. Presence versus performance. I said everything flows from the starting point. If we truly believe that prayer is the foundation and the future of the pro-life movement, then what will flow from this is a change of presence, a change in our presence. It's important to clarify what I mean by presence. When we think of having presence in contemporary parlance, we tend to think of someone who's got an aura, an ability to attract attention. So a simple example would be a celebrity walking into a room. But the reason why they have presence, the reason why they attract attention, is because we associate with them certain material achievements that will one day fade away. That's not true presence. True presence is not about aura, it's not about fame, it's not about achievement. Presence is the fruit of an interior life. It flows from communion with God. It is the quiet weight of someone whose life is rooted in prayer. The kind of presence that doesn't draw attention to itself, but has the power to awaken in another, a realization of the presence of God. We think, for instance, of Our Lady pregnant with God incarnate visiting her cousin Elizabeth. Even before she heard the greeting, the presence of Our Lady and our Lord stirred in the heart of Elizabeth, and her attention was given to the real presence of the child in her womb. That's true presence. It's not about performance. It is, as I said, about communion. It is about being able to communicate the very reality of God, the real presence from one to another. Too often the presence of the pro-life movement is only felt or noticed when we become aware of a new battle. When new legislation is introduced in Parliament, or when new attacks are issued against the unborn or the dying, or when election time rolls around. Often in such circumstances, our presence, even when well-intentioned, can risk becoming more of a performance. It can become a kind of theatre. We tend to give priority to the optics, to publicity, to dramatic gestures. The principal issue is that renders the pro-life movement reactionary. And if we are reactionary, then in truth we are quite literally reacting to a vision of evil, a vision of unreality. We must therefore be incredibly sensitive to the fact that if we give in to reactionism, then all we've really done is enter into a deeper relationship with a lie. Remember, lies feed on attention, even hostile attention. Because paradoxically, to react to darkness often means we become subtly inspired by the darkness. Even if we think we are championing the cause of light with fiery rhetoric, loud protests, and intense political lobbying. Let me reiterate again. The danger here is we let our opponents set the terms of the debate, allowing darkness to dictate our stance. A stance that we react to, but in so doing, ironically, we are shaped by the very energy, the very vision we are said to resist. And this brings me really to what is at the heart of what I want to say tonight. The primordial sign that we are reacting and performing, rather than being led by prayer and presence, is this. Our presence in the world looks no different to those we oppose. Our presence in the world looks no different to those we oppose. Even if our words proclaim life, our style will proclaim the same logic of power that we are fighting against. Even if what we espouse is the moral antithesis to what the pro-choice movement proclaims, our presence will become indistinguishable from theirs. You see, it's not only what we stand for, but how we stand for it that reveals whether our foundation is inspired by reaction or prayer, whether it is a performance, or whether it has true presence. Thus again, we must do serious reflection to ensure that our identity as individuals and as a pro-life movement is not defined reductively as simply being against the evil things like abortion or infanticide. Our identity and our movement cannot be something that only surfaces when it's challenged. Abortion did not create the pro-life stance. It only revealed the need to articulate and defend what was always true, that every presence, every life is real, sacred, and worthy of protection. With all this in mind, think about what is really happening when we commit to 40 days for life, when we stand and pray outside an abortion clinic. What is really happening when we, inspired by the vision of God, the vision of goodness, stand prayerfully in front of that place of torment? Is it simply an act of some psychological performance? Is it just a political act? Or do you believe that something profoundly spiritual is taking place? Am I convinced that God could use our humanity as a means to erupt even the darkest of visions? Do I really believe that this prayerful presence, this face of divine mercy, has the power to change hearts and minds? Does your presence, my presence, sign and reflect the bigger picture? That we are praying in front of a modern day Calvary? That the quiet prayers that you offer, mingled with the cry of Christ crucified, carry a weight that no parliament, no campaign, no protest could ever remotely achieve? Meaning comes not from noise, but from being transparent to God. Human action is never meaningless when it is united in and through divine action. If presence without prayer collapses into performance, then the next danger is mistaking performance for power. But the church has never grown by power. It has only grown through witness. And this brings me to the third and final contrast I want to reflect on tonight. Witness versus power. What the world sees as powerless, quiet prayer, silent witness, sacrificial love, is in fact the way that God changes the course of history. The crucifixion was not a performance. It was by no means an act of worldly power, but it was the ultimate witness to the reality and the real presence of divine love, divine truth, divine hope. In fact, what looked like defeat became the source of eternal victory. It is only by keeping that vision at the forefront of our minds, allowing it to be inscribed upon our hearts, that we will have the grace to resist the temptation to think that the future of the pro-life movement depends on gaining political power or cultural prestige through protest, through lobbying, or any other worldly means. The life-revealing presence that comes from prayer should make us witnesses to life. And this, I believe, is the decisive point. Being pro-life is not a slogan, it's not a campaign, it's not even a movement in an ordinary sense. Being pro-life is a way of life. It's a whole vision of reality, illuminated by grace, sustained by prayer, embodied in presence. It must touch every part of your life. It must be the essence of our lives. When you familiarize yourself with the incredible history of the Catholic Church, one thing becomes abundantly clear. The Church only ever grows when her members are inspired to act, to witness, in a manner that made absolutely no sense at all to her enemies. When Christians lived and did things that simply contradicted the logic of the world. I think of the early Christians during the times of plague. Unlike the pagans who abandoned their loved ones when they fell sick, leaving them alone to die in agony, the Christians remained with them, even attending to the pagan stranger, nursing them, caring them. In all this, witnessing to the dignity of human life, even amidst their own suffering. The world could only look on in astonishment and say, do you see how they love? I think of the martyrs who forgave their executioners, the saints who showed hospitality to their enemies, the confessors who proclaimed the faith in front of their detractors. In all such instances, the source of their vision was revealed in their witness. And so for us to truly help others to see, we must first show that you and I can see. Calmly, clearly, humanly. I say again, it does not matter how good your arguments are, how loudly we might say that we are against abortion or euthanasia. None of that matters unless we ourselves witness to and embody the reality of a heart that's been changed by Christ. We have to ask ourselves, does my own life, does it reflect and attest and witness to the infinite dignity of every human being, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? You know, I might pray outside an abortion clinic, but do I keep regular vigil in front of the real presence in the Eucharist? I might raise my voice for the unborn, but do I also bend my life towards the poor? Do I make time for the elderly? Do I take an interest in those who are different to me? We as a church might preach against the lie that is pro-choice, but are we willing to spend the time and the money to give women the emotional and financial support they need? Do we give the dying the love, the care, and the attention that they deserve? Because being a witness is not something we can switch on and off when we like. It's not something we can perform when we're asked. It has to become the very rhythm of our lives, so that in us the world might glimpse a very different vision of reality. One illuminated by grace, sustained, as I said, by prayer, and embodied, as I said, in presence. I want to conclude by saying that the vision behind the 40 Days for Life initiative and what it calls us to be is something far harder, far more encompassing than simply an act of protest. I say again, I'm not arguing that we should withdraw from debate or discussion or abandon the very best scientific and philosophical arguments in public discourse. These things will always matter. But what I have suggested tonight is that the future of the pro-life movement cannot be built upon these things alone. Because neither protest nor philosophy can heal the spiritual blindness that has become so grave and so diabolical that people literally will sit around a table and dream of a world where everyone can maim innocent life and then be motivated, inspired to bring that dark vision into reality. Only prayer, only grace can heal that kind of blindness. Because only prayer can restore our eyes. Only conversion and communion can restore vision. And only the divine presence makes that vision a vision of truth and mercy visible to others. Without prayer, without presence, without authentic witness, we risk fighting blindness with blindness. But with prayer, with presence, and with genuine witness, we can begin to see. God will allow us to help others to see the child who is truly there, to discover the church that truly loves them, to meet the Christ who is truly present in the Eucharist. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Father. That was a really inspiring talk. We're going to have the opportunity for questions now. So if anyone has a question they'd like to address to Father about this topic, the importance of prayer and presence in the pro-life movement, you can ask Father now. If you also have a question about 40 Days for Life, more specifically, and how that's happened in Sydney and going to happen in the future, we can address that question to Mr. Hanahan as well.
Thank you. Please forgive my voice. It's a combination of two things. One, too much talking, and two, I think I've caught something off my assistant priest. So forgive me. I'm surviving.
There's microphones going around. Yep. You use that, and it's being recorded.
Thanks for the talk, Father. I'm just wondering on your perspective on the importance of young adults in the pro-life movement, and what would your opinion be on how we can do our part and not miss out on doing our part?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One of the things about the pro-choice movement is it tries to give the impression that this is the youth vote. This is what young people are after. This is what young people believe. So nothing is more powerful in counteracting that narrative for young people, especially young women, to be at the forefront of what we stand for and what we believe. That's not to play an ageist game. Everyone's got to be involved. But I would say not just for the optics, but for the future. As I say, like Paul and myself will get on, there has to be another generation to step forward. And look, one of the things that gives me a lot of optimism is that I do think there's a bit of a turn in the culture that younger people, after decades now, have been filled with what is absolute nonsense, intellectually, culturally, are more disposed, more open to hearing the truth. But I think they're more inclined to be open to hearing the truth if the one communicating the truth looks a bit like them, is of their generation, of their age. I think that's a powerful witness. So, and the other thing I would say to that is don't wait to be asked to get involved. Take your own initiative. There's always something to do.
Hello. This work.
Hi there.
Wholeheartedly in agreement with everything. On the drive here and now confirmed by some of the objects in the window. Years ago I went to one of the marches for life in the US, and it was one of the worst days of my life. I felt like I was turning up to a Trump rally. And he was present. I was just like, I feel like we've missed kind of the heart of why we're here, just visually what I was hearing. And my question is, because for me, the visual, like all the transcendentals, and especially beauty, are really like fundamentally linked to my spiritual life as well. But sometimes visually what you encounter with the pro-life movement is something that's very kind of alienating because it's dated or it's ugly, offensive, trying to like get the wrong kind of reaction that's not with a pure motive. And I'm super cautious of what you're saying about things being performative rather than being about a presence, but I'm almost thinking like things that are more divinely inspired but beautiful visually, so what you encounter is more inviting. What do you think the role of that is in all of this? Yeah, again, like the lesson of the church's history is that we have never brought someone to the truth by lambasting them, by getting aggressive with them, screaming at them, shouting at them. The way that whole countries have remained Catholic is because one person said, like thinking of Peter Canisius in Poland and Germany, for example, just said the way to preserve the church, the way to promote it is to speak about its beauty. So rather than saying what we're against, it's always about saying what we are for.
that we are for women, that we are for innocent life, promoting the beauty of family life. Like, even today, given how fragmented and distorted families are becoming, there's a quiet beauty, even just seeing a mother and a father with their children playing outside, not staring at the screens. That's a pro-life image, right? Which, again, it's a simple thing, but I think we underestimate just how profoundly moving that is, because more and more you can go and see a whole family in a restaurant just staring at a screen, not even attending to the presence of the other before them. So I think, again, intellectually and also I would say spiritually, I agree with your point, that, there should be, even just the fact of praying, there's a quiet beauty to it. There's even the beauty of silence, being removed from noise. I think we underestimate that could be far more efficacious than a very eloquently put together philosophical speech, and certainly I think more effective than aggressive shouting and screaming, which is only just going to push further and further people further and further away. The other thing I would say as a priest, and I make this a real key thing in my parish, is people carry such incredible guilt and weight and shame from things like abortion. And they don't know what to do with it, which is why people get angry, why they get bitter and they get vicious. But what we're really trying to say is actually we're not just trying to communicate the reality of the unborn. We're also trying to say to you, there's a way for you to find healing. There's a way forward. Through the sacraments, the church will embrace you. The Lord will forgive you. There is a way forward. Nothing else in the world can do that except the church. And I think that's also, that side of things has to be expressed.
Thank you very much for your talk. I agree very much with the need for grace if we're going to make progress and gain victory in our nation. I just wanted to ask you a question of clarification. You spoke in almost very absolute terms about preeminence, almost of prayer in the fight against abortion or the fight for life. I wanted to clarify whether you would give the preaching of the word a similar status in wanting others to repent. Thinking about passages such as Romans 10, Ephesians 6, Hebrews 4:12.
So the starting point of anything that we do in terms of public ministry ideally has to be inspired by our prayer life. Our prayer life can't be inspired unless it's scriptural. So in terms of versing ourselves with the teaching and the person of Jesus Christ through the scriptures, well, that's just a non-negotiable. That should go without saying. Whether you would suggest, I think what you're suggesting is a public proclamation of the scriptures. So look, my take on this point is actually, I think you'll probably agree with me, is I could offer someone very sophisticated, or try to offer sophisticated philosophical arguments for the existence of God. But as I said to you, what I was trying to imply, someone coming to faith, to conversion, is not at the level of the mind. The mind can prepare you some of the way. Ultimately, it has to be a movement of the heart and the will. And like the young lady there was saying, I think we sell ourselves short if we put aside the scriptures and say, well, we'll leave that because that's too biblical, it's too theological, or we don't talk about the beauty of our faith in public life because people won't get it. Well, actually, if we believe there's a natural desire for God and people are deeply yearning for the transcendent, then we're putting away the very thing that actually might lead to their conversion. And so, even on bioethics committees, I find that you actually get further with people, not by giving them the very best scientific philosophical arguments, but saying, imagine what kind of society we want to live in. Do we want a society that was built upon the kind of love that we see emulated in the cross, a society of self-sacrifice, where we think about we give ourselves out to the other? Now, I think that kind of imagery can be far more powerful than, a regurgitation of, some sort of sophisticated scientific argument. So, I mean, that's a wordy answer, but I think in principle I agree with you.
Hello, Father.
Hi there.
Hello, Father. And I love what you say, but I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions. I was actually at that march when you were at it too, and I had the girl with the March for Life in Washington, and I had a different view of it. Tell me, if what you're saying, and I totally agree, I totally believe you, because I believe what you're saying, where in the place do we have Roe versus Wade being abolished? Where do we have other states in America saying no to abortion? Where was that? That was politics. That was being proactive.
Yeah.
Is there not a place for proactive work and what you call reactive? I think there's my secular view perhaps is, or political animal view is, that there has to be a place for both.
Yeah. I agree. It's not, and I try to clarify, I'm not against philosophical argument, using the science, engaging in the debate and the argument. What I am saying is that our engagement, even in politics, has to be inspired by prayer. If we truly trust that prayer is powerful, that prayer is God's work, and we collectively enter into that kind of spirit, I will be convinced the culture will change. Because I think you do not really, I think my experience again is that you don't change the mindset of a society by challenging the politicians. You change the mindset of society by changing one person at a time. It's a very slow process. But I find like if we invest all our energies into just trying to lobby politicians, maybe not, but maybe I should clarify what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be concerned, we shouldn't speak up, we shouldn't contribute to political life. But what I am saying is I think that engagement has to be genuinely inspired. And I think politics will change when society starts to change. So I think often at a grassroots level, we might get more success.
Father, for a lot of people, they're quite scared with praying in public and in front of an abortion clinic. What would you say to someone to encourage them to participate in a prayer?
Yeah, look, so that's a really good question. And look, I mean, people are even scared to make the sign of the cross in public. Like, so one of my parishioners said, I could never do that. Like, think, what? Come on, like, we how can we be embarrassed of the truth? Like, I mean, so I think that's the first thing, is to realize, that's a human temptation. It's a human temptation to give in to fear, because what are we more worried about? We're more worried about what people think of us, right? Well, look, they already think you're crazy if you go to church. They already think you're crazy many think you're crazy if you're pro-life. But remember, like, what we're competing against is a completely diabolical vision of reality. Like, why would we care what people think? I mean, the only thing we really should care about is what God thinks. And look, so I'd say that would be my first one. We have to be sensitive, yeah. People might not be able to jump into this quickly. But at the very least, as a starting point, you could say, well, during the vigil, I'll go and pray in St. Mary's Cathedral and do a holy hour. As a starting point. Even if just doing that. And I think once they've done that, the Lord will give them the grace to maybe then pray outside the clinic. Yeah.
Father, brilliant talk. I just wanted to ask, as Christians, we do have an interior life, but how can we inspire atheists or people that don't have an interior life into this kind of cultural change? I can appreciate the transcendentals, but can you elaborate further how, in a pragmatic or a practical way, we can do that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I take a great interest in atheists. When I was first ordained, I was sent out to Broken Hill. So this was like 2011. And I didn't have many friends out in Broken Hill at the time. So I spent about 6 months reading every book on atheism. I read all of Dawkins, all of Hitchens. I became obsessed with it. And then at Oxford and Cambridge, I spent most of my time around people that were agnostic or atheistic. So I'd say a few things. Number one, I often try to find out first and foremost what it is that underpins their atheism and agnosticism. Now, this is the fascinating thing, and I find this more and more often, not just with very intelligent people, but just across the board. They might say they're an atheist or agnostic, but really there's not much thought to it. There's not really much depth of thought. It's almost sometimes it's as simple as, well, there's no scientific evidence, so therefore I don't believe in God, or something like this. I guess like another way to say this, the issue for me, like my experience is not so much it's an intellectual objection, it's often a moral objection. So the idea of God, if God exists, that means that my freedom, I will be held accountable for how I use my freedom. Like on a Saturday morning, I'll meet 2 to 3 families for baptismal interviews. And as you know, invariably I'll say like, why do you come to Mass? And they go, no, Father, so busy. And I used to take that at face value. But, about a year ago, I really started to push back. And I was astonished what people would say, like almost 3 in a row. But I said, what is it really that's keeping you away from the church? Like they'll put down atheists, like the dad would. And literally, I remember three families in a row said the same thing. I'm afraid. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about the end of life or the bigger questions of life. And like the culture today conditions us to be afraid of those questions. Why do you think the anxiety rates have gone so crazy post-COVID? It's because for a while people were stripped of everything that was distracting them, and now the questions of their heart start to surface. They're confronted with the reality of death and realize, hold on, these are really painful questions. I don't know what to do. I need a distraction, so let's just stare at a screen. It's a recipe for disaster. So that's the first thing I would say is you've got to know what really undergirds the atheism. So quite often, even when I was at Oxford, like bright people, there wasn't really much depth of intellectual thought. Some of them were. Some of them really had been engaged with the science, but more often not, that wasn't the case. The second thing I would say is realize that what we have is actually what they're hungry for. And the best way to emulate that is in your life. Developing good friendships and then seeing you behave differently. The way that you speak about like sexual morality, the way you speak about your career, the way that you speak about others, they will discern a noticeable difference in your behavior or a noticeable happiness that they don't have. And often that can be a powerful way in. Say, well, what is it that you have that I don't have?
This lady's been waiting for a while. She's very patient.
Please forgive my nerves.
No, not at all, no.
I have a sensitive question.
Yeah.
Special needs, disabilities.
Yeah.
We're all made in God's image and likeness.
Mm-hmm.
Not perfect or not. How do you convince people that when a mother says, my child is going to be born disabled, I need to do it?
Yeah.
That's sorry, it happens, and I've seen it
Yeah.
happen. Where you've got to convince the parent, your child is God's child.
Yeah, so the question was, how do you help someone to realize that a child that's born with a disability is truly a child of God and created in the image and likeness of God?
Without judging the parent's decision.
Yeah. So, as you know, so many children with Down syndrome would be aborted, like it must be the states, I don't know what the stats are like now, maybe 95%. Yeah, it's...
Because it's a burden on the parent.
Well, that's how it's taught. Like, it's seen as a burden. But every family that I've seen that's embraced a child with Down syndrome or some disability, it brings that family to life. Because again, it's the narrative. What is the source of our happiness? Our happiness is not found in just getting what I want, my comfort. We become alive as human beings by giving of ourselves to others. And so the fact that you have a child that might require more attention, more care, is actually helping you to be a better human being. It's actually going to bring you out of yourself. And again, this is one of the crises of today, and you talk to psychologists, had one guy ask him, what's the problem? Why is the anxiety rate so crazy with the children? And he said, I can tell you, Father, in one word, parents. And I said, what do you mean? He said, parents just want an easy life. He says, I'll have the child there, I'll give them the counselling, and then they'll be in the waiting room, the child will muck up, and they will reward the bad behaviour because they think that's the way to keep things easy. Or they'll even say things, well, what about my happiness? And that's effectively when someone aborts a child with a disability or Down syndrome, that's what it's really saying. It's about me. It's about my happiness.
The child is no less human. And we
for
know
sure.
That. We know that. How do we convince a parent to keep your child?
Yeah, well, I think we have to give, I think the best thing is to give them lived examples of other families where they've kept the child. They're the best witnesses. I don't think when a child is born with Down syndrome, anyone says they're not human. We might like to sort of have this cognitive dissonance and say in the womb we can do what we like, and then outside here,
Not normal, so
yeah. But we're all wounded and broken in one way or another, right?
I've had this debate with people.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's great. It's a good question.
Good question. Time. Thank you very much, Father. When I asked him to do this talk and he agreed, I wasn't really sure what he was going to cover, and we never really spoke about that. I gave him some of Monsignor Riley's talks. He didn't use any of that. He's a philosopher, all right? I got to say, Father, it was more than I expected. It was very good. And it was the perspective you brought to the debate was fantastic, and I hope everyone got a lot out of it. And here's the thing. You're hopefully here because there's some interest in participating in 40 Days for Life. It's all well and good to come along to listen to inspiring talks and to get along with other people and have tea and coffee and have a chat on a Friday evening. It's all well and good to come to the opening and closing events with a few hundred people and the police escorts. It's another thing to stand on the street with just a couple of you in the heat or the cold or the rain or the wind or the harassment and do it for several hours when it's boring, when it's tedious, when it's difficult for whatever reason. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where 40 Days for Life campaigns are won and lost. That's why they're successful when people persevere. I'd always been very reluctant when I've had a lot of people say to me, we need to do 40 Days for Life again, Paul. And I would say to them usually, who's we, white man? You mean me. Where were you when I spent 250 hours over those 40 days standing on a street? Myself and several others. And those several others include one of my sons who was working at FLI at the time, and others who were very active and very reliable, who aren't around now or aren't able to do that now for one reason or another. I've always said we need 100 people to commit 4 hours a week. Let me put it in perspective, I suppose. I've spent thousands of hours standing at the front of these places. 4 hours a week doesn't seem that hard to me, but I get when you've never done it or you've hardly done it, it might be tough. And it's not just good enough to commit for the first week and be all excited and find other things to do and other reasons not to come. It won't work if people aren't committed for the 6 weeks and are serious about it. And here's what motivates me. This is about the salvation of souls. It's what Father was just talking about. It's not just saving babies, but I've seen many babies saved. I've held babies in my arms that were saved from abortion. I've had the mothers standing in front of me with tears in their eyes saying, thank you. I know the methodology we employ works because it all starts with one. It's all about the one in front of you. It's not about changing the world. It's about affecting the one in front of you. That's how the early Christians affected the great change they did. That's how they lived that faith that inspired the conversion of the world. And we have to do it again. That's where we're at. We live in a neo-pagan world. And they're lost. And they're living in darkness, as Father so eloquently described. We need to be committed to God first and to love our neighbour for the sake of God. And that's how 40 Days for Life campaigns and prayer vigils at abortion clinics work. So they've got some enrolment forms or expressions of interest. So you don't have to commit. If you sign this or fill this out and give it to us, it doesn't mean you've signed up and there's no way out. It's not like joining the Marines, right? You can still change your mind, and we still want you to think about it. And we're still going to run another event later in the year, because 40 Days for Life next year starts early in February, mid-February. We will probably hold something in November. I'm going to be having lunch with now retired Archbishop Julian Porteous this coming week. I'm hoping he'll come up and maybe speak at that. I'm also hoping to get some of the mothers that we helped perhaps come and speak at that. There's an old adage, Father, I come from a sales and marketing background, you know. Logic opens the mind, emotion opens the checkbook. So, and in the pro-life debate or the faith debate, logic opens the mind, but it's the emotion that opens the heart. They've got to see the love, okay? And that's what we want. So please give serious thought to that. Give us your details so we can keep in touch and communicate, and you'll know what's coming up. I'm putting a lot more time and effort into actually promoting this coming up 40 Days for Life. And the reason I, by the way, decided to go ahead with this one again was because a group of young people who are all here, this young fellow and a few others, said to me the same thing, we should do 40 Days for Life, Paul. And I said the same, what I said. And they didn't tell me, they did a novena, they did a 9-day prayers, if you don't know what a novena is. And they came back and said, yeah, we want to do it. Well, now I'm stuck. So, here we are. But I know they're capable of actually taking this on board and learning how to run it themselves and to take it forward, and that's inspiring to me. That's fantastic to see. So God bless you guys, and please, again, a round of applause for Father, and tea and coffee after. So thank you. A gift for you, Father.
Thanks very much.
You can bring it round to my place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanahan, and thank you very much, Father Morgan. If you'd like to stay and socialise for a bit, there's plenty more tea and coffee, and as Mr. Hanahan mentioned, there's a QR code you can scan at these tables if you'd like to put in an expression of interest for 40 Days for Life next year. Thank you very much.